Hey, Shanif.
Hey, what's up? Hey, again, how you doing?
Top of the hour to you. It's noon. I'm doing well, thanks. What's up in New York?
Top of the hour. Decent day. It's not raining, which is rare for us these days, but and there's a building outside that's being constructed right outside my window, so I apologize if you guys hear construction noises. Other than that, I'm doing good.
All right, nice. No, I can't hear anything, but yeah, it's sunny
Good.
here. So we're we're live.
All right, so we're live. Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back here. If you joined us last week, thank you so much. If you remember, Gen had talked a lot about how to use AI to generate long form content, and that's a process I use myself. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how do you use company data with AI. So I'll jump into a presentation here. Again, I think you can take a look at the comments and you'll holler if anybody has a question. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so if you guys have questions, please feel free to add them. We love to make this all sort of really interactive as much as we can. All right, so give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to start sharing. Okay. All right. Again, can you see my screen? It's coming up here called Using Company Data with AI.
Yeah. We gotta edit to Sage. All right. Yep.
Okay. Good to go?
Yes. Good to go.
All righty. Well, hey, everyone. Thank you. And so let's just jump right in. So today we're going to be talking about using company data with AI. And I wanted to keep this a little bit practical. And so we're going to sort of try to learn 4 different things today. So first, what does it actually mean to use company data with AI? Like that's a little bit of a vague topic, right? So we're going to cover what that could look like in a couple of different use cases. Okay, so then we're going to talk about building. If you really want to use company data with AI, you can build or you can buy. And we're going to talk about what you should be aware of if you're trying to build your own custom application. And it's not going to be technical. It's really the goal is to keep you aware as somebody who's maybe managing an effort about what to be aware of. All right, third, we're going to get into buying. And this is probably one of my favorite sections. We're going to actually open up a couple of tools and I'll show you how you can use them. So jumping away from the slides a little bit. And then at the end, we'll talk about what to be aware of. There's 2 or 3 very common pitfalls when it comes to using AI. So it's important for you to be aware of that. But before we start, just a quick introduction. So again, maybe you can give a quick introduction to yourself. I can't see you. I'm staring at a big black screen. But if you can hear me, you want to give an intro to who you are?
Yeah, sure. So right now I'm working on supermarketers.ai, which is an AI consulting firm for marketers to learn more about marketing with AI. So really focusing on the newsletter and then just helping some companies, SaaS companies, e-commerce brands, and AI companies learn more. And my background, the reason how I fell into this was like you, Shanif, we met as founders of an e-commerce SaaS. So we're in the Shopify space for a couple of years. And I was a bootstrap founder, and my 2 co-founders, we tried to stay as lean as possible so that we could do things ourselves. The downside is when you have limited funds and you have uh, limited resources just in general by design, you are kind of like beholden to what you can do manually. And I realized we did sell it earlier this year, which is great. So we did come full circle from starting to selling. But what I realized is that we were kind of selling ourselves short in terms of what we could have done because we didn't leverage AI and automation. So earlier this year, I made a package, especially as tools like ChatGPT were making it super easy for consumers to access the power of AI, that I wanted to learn it for myself and then also help marketers learn how to use AI to become better marketers. So yeah, that's where we're at now.
Gen's awesome, guys. If you didn't go check out his webinar from last week, you definitely got to check it out if you're doing anything in content generation. All right. And as for me, I like to call myself a data geek. I have been in the world of software for a while now and in the world of AI for a little bit less, but mostly just building code, building machine learning systems, building AI tools. Today, I'm working on Locusive, which is a company that helps businesses connect their data to ChatGPT. So we'll build anything from a chatbot to jobs that work in the background to take your data from one place and put it into another with ChatGPT in the middle. So doing a lot of work in this space right now. I find it fascinating. All right, so let's just jump right in. what the heck are we talking about today? So using your company data with AI, what does that mean? This can mean different things to different people. It could mean something like, if you're a marketer, this could mean that you're using information about your product and your company to write long form content. If you're a coder, this could mean using AI to create code. If you're a CEO, this could mean creating your own LLM product, which I would not necessarily recommend. So today I'm just going to start by setting the scene a little bit, setting the stage a little bit, and going through a couple of different applications and ways that I consider it to look like using data with AI. All right, so the first one is one that Gen is very familiar with. If you're a marketer, you're probably producing a lot of content. And especially if you're a content marketer or social media manager, you're producing a lot of SEO content. This is an area that's probably very near and dear to your heart. You may have seen what it looks like to produce long form content without giving an AI access to your information. It's not that good. But if you work with AI to provide all of the context it needs and to iterate over the course of building an article iteratively, section by section, it does a good job. So here's one way you can use your company data with AI. It's by providing context for marketing. If you're customer support, there's a brand new way you could do it. Another way, which is you might be able to use a bot that can plug into your knowledge base, like your FAQ documents or even your customer database itself. And that bot might be able to do things like anything simple, like resetting a customer password, all the way up to answering highly specific customer questions. And the way it does that is by actually reading the data that makes up your company's systems in real time and then responding with the correct answer. So this is another way that you might be able to use your company data with AI. If you're an analyst, you might be able to actually take your data sets and upload them into something like ChatGPT and start to come up with data analyses, graphs, charts for your specific data. And so yet another way. And just to cap off this fun time here, if you're a C-suite person, generally you're telling me, hey, I want to take all the information I have from my company reports and documentation and build my own LLM and then start selling that to my competitors or customers. This is one way you could use company data with AI. This is probably one of the more sophisticated ways I've heard of. A buddy of mine runs a medical consulting practice, and he does a lot of work around clinical trials, and they've built up a large data set of knowledge over the past 20 years. He would love to be able to provide this information in the form of an LLM to his competitors. Okay, so I hope I didn't confuse you even more, but there's a commonality among all of these applications. And it is that you're using your specific domain data to run an application or to accomplish a specific task. And that's really the realm of the world that we'll be playing in today. It's how can you most easily get your company data into an AI system so that you can accomplish some goal. All right, so I mentioned at the start, we're going to be talking about a couple of different ways to do this. One is you build an application yourself that you need, and the other is buying something. So we're going to talk about building first because it's probably not going to be applicable to as many people. It's one of those things that does a good job of setting the stage, but it's sort of less relevant to anyone who's not part of an engineering team. But let's talk about it. Why would you want to build something? Why not just use ChatGPT and use a bunch of plugins? Well, there's sort of three things that I think about. One is that even with plugins, it's really hard for ChatGPT to get access to your whole knowledge base. And that might be fine for certain applications. But if you're building something like a search tool and you're trying to figure out an answer across 5,000 documents and find the right document, this is going to be almost impossible with ChatGPT. You might have a good plugin out there that I don't know about, so I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's going to be really hard to do, and it might be more hassle than it's worth, and it's a little bit harder to collaborate or build something that your users are seeing. And that kind of brings me to the second point. It's really hard to use ChatGPT to power your own application. So maybe you want to use an AI tool to provide a customer support bot within your app or provide an internal research tool. Well, you're going to need to use an API to do that. You could use ChatGPT's API, or you could build your own LLM app. We'll talk about that. But ultimately, using ChatGPT with plugins wouldn't allow you to embed the power of AI within your own applications. And so you're going to need to start to think about a different alternative. And finally, ChatGPT is really good for taking a large content history and summarizing it or providing information out of it. But if you've got a giant knowledge base of 1,000 documents or a whole bunch of information or a database that you want it to have access to, and it's a lot of information, you're not going to be able to get all that information into ChatGPT. And even with plugins, it's going to be a little bit hard. And you might need to build custom built infrastructure for that. So these are some of the reasons why you might want to go away from using ChatGPT with your own plugins. So let's talk about what that could look like. A lot of people come to me and they say, hey, I want to train ChatGPT with my own data. Well, my hope is that after this webinar, you're going to learn that that's not really something you're going to do. You might train a brand new model, and certainly that's an option. You might want to train your own LLM based on your own data. But unless your name is Facebook or OpenAI or Google or one of these big guys, that's very, very hard to do. One, you're gathering information from the internet, so you need to have a lot of resources. You need to be able to pay a lot of machine learning engineers. Two, you need to be able to actually pay for the hardware that trains all these models. And there are ways to do it with smaller hardware, but if you want something like OpenAI's ChatGPT, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of money. So most people aren't going to go this route. Some people will do a little bit of work with open source models, but most people aren't going to go this route. So the second option you have is you could fine tune a model. Fine tuning is this process of taking something like that's already built, like ChatGPT, and providing it access to a custom built data source or data set that tries to teach it about your own information. So the idea is maybe you'll have a couple of hundred, or even better, a couple of thousand examples where you give it an example could look like a sample prompt and then the answer that it should respond with. And you've got a whole bunch of these. You can use this data set to essentially train ChatGPT. Now, there's a few problems with this. There's sort of a hit or miss success ratio with something like this. In general, I've found that folks who try to fine-tune ChatGPT won't get that much benefit out of it. Sometimes ChatGPT won't remember all the information that it's been given. Sometimes it might even forget what it's already learned. And so fine-tuning could work for you, but fine-tuning, even in OpenAI's own words, is better used for adjusting maybe something like tone or style, or training ChatGPT on how to respond with a certain voice. It's a little bit less about remembering knowledge, and it's a little bit more about teaching it the style or format to output data in. So that really leaves us with sort of the last option, but it's a really good option. And so the idea is, it's named Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. The idea is you give access to ChatGPT, to your data sources or your knowledge base, and then you've got a system that can essentially pull in the right data at the right time. Pulls in a small enough sample size that ChatGPT will be able to take the information, but large enough where ChatGPT will be able to respond properly. All right, so I'm guessing the majority of you may not care about all this, so we're not going to spend too much time here. The one thing I do want to mention with RAG is if you are doing this, there's a few things you're going to have to care about. First, you're going to need a vector database so you can store all of your data, or you could use something like Locusive's API. The second thing is you're going to need to have a system that can look up the right information at the right time. And then third, you're going to need to be able to plug all of this into ChatGPT. This requires engineering work, or it might require you to buy something out of the shelf. With RAG, you do have you have a couple of things to watch out for. So hallucinations with or without RAG is something to always be aware of. If you've never heard this term, hallucinations is the idea of an LLM making up information, just making facts up out of nowhere. And this is due to sort of the way that it's been trained. And this is something that a lot of businesses are worried about when it comes to using LLMs, particularly if their applications are user-facing or customer-facing. So you're going to have to make sure that if you are building your own system, that you've done a good enough job to make sure that these LLMs can avoid making things up. Second, you're going to run into rate limits, especially with ChatGPT, maybe only with ChatGPT, but you're not going to be able to provide a whole bunch of information all at once. They will slow you down. They will throw errors. And so you're going to need to have code that can deal with that. And then finally, small context windows. So these are all things that if you're building, it's really hard to get. It's not really hard, but it is hard to get around some of these things. We've actually created an API of our own to help customers get around this. It's totally free for you to use at the moment. So hopefully, if you are building, you can start looking into some of these options and avoid them early. All right, so now we're getting into some of my favorite part of this webinar, and it's sort of talking about what's out there. What can you use today if you're looking to use ChatGPT with your own data? Let's talk about chatbots first. So as far as chatbots go, you've got the LLM providers, obviously something like ChatGPT. You've probably seen this. I don't need to spend a bunch of time on it, but if you've never seen it, this is ChatGPT. You have the ability to use different plugins if you're using GPT-4. I also really like Claude, which is a really, really good tool for producing long form content. If you've never heard about it, Claude is produced by this company called Anthropic. And this is actually a conversation I've produced with Claude to come up with a long form content. This is a conversation that I essentially used following Gen's process and the process we did a webinar on earlier, where I had it break down. Let's see if I can scroll to the top here. I had it essentially come up with an outline for a keyword that I wanted to target. And then I gave it information about my competitors, as well as information about my own company. And I then asked it to start writing content section by section. And this might have taken me a little bit of time, maybe it took an hour or two, but it came up with really high quality content. So chatbots, really good. You can also have chatbots that you can embed on your website. So here's a chatbot, probably one of the more famous ones right now. It's called Chatbase. And Chatbase allows you to plug in data sources or files, and then it allows you to actually embed a chatbot onto your website. In my case, I believe I have plugged in this chatbot to use Locusive's website. And so I can do something like I can ask it, what is Locusive? And then it'll come back and it'll say, hey, look, here's what I've learned from the answers or from the context you've provided me. And of course, you can embed this on your website, so it's pretty easy to use. And then you've got tools like the one that I built.
Yeah, Shaniv, sorry, is that a no-code
Yep.
tool?
Yeah, Chatbase is a no-code tool, and they make it really easy to, you just copy and paste a little bit of code, and it shows this whole thing on your website. You don't have to write any code yourself. Pretty sweet. All right, and then finally, I would be, sort of remiss if I didn't talk about the Slack bot that we built at Locusive, which basically allows you to connect all of your different data sources, and it's a little bit more of a search tool. It allows you to plug in things like your Salesforce API, documents, Google Drive. Right before this conversation, right before this call, I used Locusive just to test it out. I asked it like, hey, is Yelp hiring engineers? And it gave me an answer based on my existing documentation. I have a document about LED lamps in my knowledge base. So I asked it, what is an LED lamp? Provides the information you need, and it links you to the source. So I think those are some of the more interesting chatbots that you've got available to you today, but there are a ton. There's chatbots for internal research like Locusive. There's chatbots for customer support. Intercom is obviously a big one. So a lot of interesting things happening here in that world. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about content. So what are some of the more interesting content items out there? Well, if you missed our webinar last week, we went through a process of using ChatGPT to essentially produce long-form content. And I think that the combination of ChatGPT plus Claude is a really good way to do it. For example, you might say something like, I think the webinar we did last week was on YouTube automation. And so what you can do is you can use, I'll just type in a quick example here. You can use ChatGPT, do things like come up with a summary of a particular URL. Please provide a summary of this page. This is a little bit less sophisticated than I normally do it, but if you've got access to ChatGPT and plugins, you can have it come up with a summary. You can have it learn about your own website and your own company, and then you can use that information to create a long-form content, a piece of content. So I'm not going to get too far into this because we did a whole webinar last week. You can go and check that out, but this is a really good way to create content. There are other tools out there as well. So you've got tools like Jasper. You've got Gen's alma mater, Content at Scale. These are all tools that are designed to help you write better posts. I have found the most success myself in doing this process a little bit more manually by using ChatGPT to come up with an outline and then copying over all the information it gets into Claude. I have to do that because Claude doesn't have web access. So I'm not going to spend more time here, but if you guys have questions, please feel free to reach out. All right, now let's talk about Images. Images are really interesting. If you haven't gotten access yet to ChatGPT with Dolly, you can double check because I think they just rolled it out. Oops. But you can start to use ChatGPT now to generate images. So here's an example where I asked ChatGPT to generate an image of a sky with a bunch of clouds that look like dogs. And I might even be able to, do some other things. Please generate an image of a robot standing by a river. This is really interesting. So you're now able to create custom-made images for your content. This is something that I find mind-blowing. You do need to be subscribed to ChatGPT 4, which is $20 a month to do something like this. You can also use a tool called Midjourney. And so Midjourney is a little bit more of a funky tool, but it does work. And I'll share that with you right now. With Midjourney, you can use this tool and you can type in /imagine. And you can say the same thing, robot by the river. And what it does is it will go through this tool as well as ChatGPT will generate 4 images side by side. There's probably a few others out there, but the thing I want to get across is these AI tools can work really well in conjunction with sort of a human in the loop who gives it information about your website or your company, and you can produce these really high quality pieces of content now where you couldn't necessarily do it before.
Yeah, Shanif, if I could chime in, one thing, both with Midjourney and ChatGPT, if you upload an image and then you can ask to describe that image in text, and then you can even add more context, like I want to use this text to replicate a similar image. You can do that in Midjourney. The prompt is /describe, and then you're just getting a written description of the image. And the reason why that's great is because if you might have a swipe file that you've been building up over years of creative that you like, and depending on what your use case is, you might want to replicate something like it, but something specific to your needs. And so you can upload that and get a description and then add more context in the text, in the prompt text that you wanted to do it for, a webinar on data in ChatGPT, for example. So that reverse engineering of images that you give it really unlocks like a whole lot more, because the challenge for me is I don't know what I don't know. And so it's hard for me to put in words what I see because I'm just not that good with describing visuals.
That's a great point. You've always got such good tips, Ken, like just the knowledge, like amazing knowledge base here. I want to plug you into AI, see what I could do there. All right.
Yeah, right.
All right, so you got images. Now let's talk a little bit about videos. So you can use new tools to create and edit videos that are relevant to your company. So I know we're getting a little bit away from the idea of using company data, but bear with me here because I think this is still important and relevant to know. There's a bunch of video editing tools out there. One that I wanted to point out was Vocal Video. So I've got a good friend of mine who's also one of our customers. What's up, Ryan? Hope you're watching. Basically, you can use these tools to create and edit videos. In the case of Vocal Video, you've got the ability to create testimonials, and you can start to do things like adding text or changing colors. You can add things like, viewing the transcript. So there's a whole bunch of video editing tools that you can use to do whatever you need to do with your company. Now, finally, with BI, business intelligence, we are sort of getting to the end of the list of tools here. But this is one that probably touches base on the heart of the topic that we've been talking about here. So I've got this example hurricanes.csv spreadsheet file here. Basically just has some information about hurricanes. And I was able to use ChatGPT to upload this file and ask a question, hey, how many hurricanes were there in this year? And it provides me the answer. Now, this is a really interesting way to use your company data for analytics. You might be able to export your data set, whatever that might be, and upload it as a CSV file, and then use ChatGPT's advanced data analysis tool, sorry. And you can start to do things like exploring your data. It will even go through and it'll create charts and graphs for you. And this is sort of the quintessential way of using your company data with AI. So all of this goes to say, if you're trying to incorporate AI into your company, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You can build your own app which I've got a couple of webinars on earlier that I've produced. You can buy a tool, and here are some of the tools that are produced for you. So we're almost done now, but I wanted to go over a couple of things that you should just be aware of whenever you're using AI. This is one I feel like I keep talking about, hallucinations. The idea is that LLMs have this tendency to make stuff up. The one caveat here I've got is that I'm saying, hey, LLMs are not databases. This is one thing that I think a lot of people maybe misconstrue, is that like they think that LLMs are a giant repository of databases where they can just ask a question and get an exact answer back. LLMs don't actually go through and remember data in the same way that maybe Google does. What they do is they read the world's data, they look at the internet, and they sort of represent that data in more of a compressed format. And that means that sometimes they're not going to be able to remember things verbatim. So just something to keep in mind here is that if you are using LLMs for your own company purposes, whether that's creating an application or just researching things internally for your job, you're always going to want to make sure you double check what's going on with an LLM if you're asking it for facts or factual information. Really, all they're trying to do, these tools are basically designed to predict words. And so it's your job to make sure that you are double checking whatever it is that they're saying. And then finally, when it comes to data privacy, there's a couple of important things to keep in mind here. The most private solution you could have is if you create your own LLM or you stand up an open source version and you just operate it yourself. The reason this is the most private is because whenever you're interacting with an LLM, you need to be able to send it information. And if you are sending information to something like OpenAI or Google, it leaves your servers and it goes to OpenAI servers. And now they have access to it. So there is a way to sort of get around that. If you don't want to stand up your own LLM, you can use one of their APIs. For example, ChatGPT has said anything that comes to their API, they won't use it to train their models, and they'll get rid of it after 30 days. The OpenAI playground also applies to this. So if you don't want to have ChatGPT use your data to train, you'll just use their API or their playground. And then the least private is if you're using ChatGPT's website, because they say that they basically reserve the right to take anything that you put on their website and use to train their models in the future. So you might be giving away a lot of information. Now, if you don't care, then this doesn't really matter, but it is something to be aware of. And so this is one of those things. Also, one thing about using their website, a lot of folks tend to think, have told me, hey, I don't want, ChatGPT, as soon as I tell it something, I expect it to learn about that information so it can use that in future conversations. Well, it actually doesn't work quite that way. ChatGPT, the guys who build it, OpenAI, will take that information, the conversation that you have with ChatGPT, and then they'll maybe use it at a later date to train ChatGPT. So if you go from one conversation to the next, it actually doesn't remember the information that you give it. So one way around that is to use ChatGPT's custom instructions box to make sure that it has the same information every time you use it. Just a quick caveat, I wanted to point it out there.
Hey, Shanif, question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question from Peter. If your app that uses RAG has a prompt that states only reply with answers from the attached file, does that eliminate hallucinations?
That will work. I'm going to say 99.9999% of the time, that will eliminate hallucinations. The prompt has to be really on point, but for the most part, that will generally take care of it. And that's really the only way I've seen that will systematically and consistently eliminate hallucinations. Now, I leave a little bit of a gap here to say it's not going to work 100% of the time. And the reason is that these tools are what's called stochastic, or they're random. So giving them the same input and the same context every time might and usually does result in slightly separate output. And these things are a little bit too random. So, sometimes they may not actually look at the data that you give it. That being said, I haven't ever seen it make stuff up when I give context. What I have seen it do is say, hey, I can't find the information from this context, even though it is there. So maybe that's actually better, but long answer was that. Short answer is, yeah, you should be okay by doing that. Good question. And so that essentially brings us to, a time where we do have time for some questions now. I wanted to keep this non-technical. I wanted to keep it short. The idea of using company data with ChatGPT is wide and big, but I wanted to give a quick overview. So if anyone has any questions now, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, again, I'm curious. You've done a ton of work with content specifically. Have you ever come across any other areas where you found AI to be useful with company-specific data? Curious about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think maybe the notion of few-shot prompting, where zero-shot prompting is like if you're using something and say you want to write a blog post title, and you might say, I'm writing a blog post on how to use company data with AI. Give me a title. So that would be considered zero-shot prompting, where you're just looking for an output with very little context. But with an LLM, I think the more context that you give it, the more details and the more parameters of this is what the output is, this is what I'm looking for, the better the result will be. So you might give it like a one-shot prompt, maybe like, here's an example of something that I'm looking for. And it would be like, maybe you're going to Google, you're finding the top ranking posts on how to use company data with LLM. And then you might say, I want something along those lines. Or maybe you have a hook that works really well for other content and you want to replicate it. Then there's few shot prompting, where you're kind of doing it almost with more examples. And basically, the more data you're feeding it about your company and your desired output and goals, the better the output. So yeah, that's one point that I had in terms of like specifying the data for your use case and for your company.
Yeah, that's a really good example. One thing that I found interesting is back in like March and April, I had to do that quite a bit. But these days, I find that I don't have to prompt it or give it examples of what to do now. And I wonder if that's just my perception. And if not, I wonder if OpenAI has worked on this. But that's a really good point. If you guys ever find yourself not getting the results you want, just give ChatGPT a couple of examples that it could use to learn from. And you can put that right in the prompt. Awesome.
How do you organize your prompts so that it's easy?
I am probably not too great at that. I think you guys probably saw my ChatGPT, which just has a ton of different prompts here and then a whole bunch of prompts here. I know that, again, you've pointed out a couple of tools to me that I thought were kind of interesting. I think prompt libraries and prompt folders. For me, what I do is I tend to go in, and anytime I have a new topic I want to bring up, I'll just start a new chat. Probably not the most efficient. It's been working for me now, but I know you've got a few tools that you use. You want to go over how you do that?
Yeah, sure. So one is Text Blaze, which is basically a text expander. So I think the URL is blaze.today. And so it's a Chrome extension. And the reason you might want to use that is because there are certain things that you're constantly doing. So you might be using the role that you are giving ChatGPT. So if it's a copywriter role, a developer role, a SaaS marketer role, you just basically write the prompt in detail once, and then you're able to just expand it with a keyboard shortcut like / growth marketer, if you want that role to be the same. Likewise, you're constantly using the same prompts for a target audience or a use case or the format of the output that you're looking for. Say you want a content plan in table format with the columns, keyword, title, content pillar, URL slug or something. So that's just one thing. And then you can kind of create folders in Text Blaze so that it's easier to use. And so it is a Chrome extension, so you can just add it. It's free. I think you get 20 prompts for free or something. So that's something that's good to do.
That's pretty cool. Does it only work, or does it work anywhere? You just have to type that / first?
Yeah. So if for example, you're doing a lot of emails, you're writing the same email over and over, that's an example that you could use it for.
Sweet. Okay. Very cool. It's a good idea. I know you got a few other tools as well. Are there any tools you want to mention on this call, since we got a couple extra minutes, that might help people in their own work?
Harpa.ai is an interesting Chrome extension. The amount of like functionality and features that you get there for free is pretty mind-blowing. I like some of their SEO related stuff in terms of, you're on a page, you can have Harpa again, a Chrome extension, and then you can click it. It would drop down, so you can add, summarize this, write a blog post or write a social media post, analyze it. Or if you're getting more technical, then you can say, pull all the header tags, pull all the keywords, pull all the SEO, like the FAQs. Then you can kind of even create keyword strategies for a particular keyword. So it goes far beyond what just a Chrome extension is. So that I think is a good one.
Got it.
But in the meantime, Peter has asked, how expensive can the RAG approach get when you factor in the cost of the vector database and the ChatGPT API usage?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the benefits of you guys joining in today is I'm a very open book. So I'll just sort of walk you through what I do today. I've got Pinecone, which is my vector database, and I'm like 80% happy with it. It does okay. Pinecone generally costs me about, I think it's like $120 a month, if I remember correctly. I'll just bring it up here. And that's for their smallest version. And at the moment, I've got about 20% pod fullness. So $105 a month for Pinecone. And then in general, my ChatGPT usage is something like $100 a month, maybe. So I've got a max of 600, but I think last month it was about $100. Now, this is me as a sort of initial entrepreneur. I've got a handful of paying customers. I've got no more than a couple 100,000 vectors in my vector database, paying a couple $100 a month. But as soon as I start to scale up, I'm going to need to add additional pods to Pinecone. And right now, I require my customers to provide their own API keys. But as soon as I start using my own API key for ChatGPT, it's going to probably add a couple $100. And so it's a really good question, Peter. The infrastructure costs can get high. When you're scaling, you may not need to worry about that. When you're growing and suddenly a lot of people are using you, then there might be some issues. But direct look into sort of the cost that I'm paying today. Hopefully that gives you a sense for at least getting started. And then you can imagine scaling up maybe a couple of orders of magnitude when things get much larger.
So what's the alternative then, not using the RAG approach?
There's a few things you could do, right? It depends. And again, it sort of depends on what do you want to do when it comes to using your company data with AI, like we talked about earlier. If you're trying to build your own application, a lot of folks now are hosting, cool, Peter, so thanks. A lot of folks are hosting their own open source LLMs where they are taking care of a lot of they're essentially transferring their variable costs into fixed costs. And so what I mean by that is they're standing up their own open source LLMs. They're using their own databases to plug into those LLMs. And if they're doing it properly, they don't need to pay on a per request basis. So if you're really technical and you want to build your own tools like this, you can host it all yourself. I think the smallest version of Llama 70B, which is one of the best open source models out there, is a couple of $1,000, or maybe $500 or $600 a month. That's one potential alternative. The other is, if you're just a casual user, just copy and paste whatever context you need into ChatGPT every time you use it, or use custom instructions, and use something like WebPilot to go out and get the information every time you need. So it really kind of depends. A lot of the C-level folks I've talked to today have this concept of wanting to use AI for improving their customer journeys, and every journey is different for every company. But the idea is, hey, using everything we know about our product and our customers, wouldn't it be great if we could surface the right information at the right time? And if you're not using RAG for something like that, you're using a lot of rule-based systems, or you're using a lot of domain-specific knowledge to create hard-coded apps. RAG is just really good if you have a bunch of information and you need to be able to ask a bunch of questions or come up with a bunch of on-demand answers. Have you ever found anything, again, that works separately or works kind of along what you were talking about?
No.
Such a new space, such a new world right now that this is one of the best ways to do it. There's also things like Elasticache. So this is like a search tool that was around way before LLMs, and it lets you search through your data a little bit more efficiently. So that's something you could do, and that's relatively cheap. You can host that on AWS or GCP, and it's not too bad. So that's one way to get around that RAG generation process.
Cool. So if we're talking like Easiest places to get started, most helpful. Do you think Chatbase is that, or Locusive?
I think Chatbase is really good for embedding a chat bot on your website. And if you've got a lot of documentation to provide it, then it's great. Some companies say, "Hey, I don't have anything documented," and tools like Chatbase, they can read your website, so that might be one way to get started. But this is really good for external facing tools. Locusive is a little bit better for internal research and like asking a bunch of questions from your own knowledge base and getting answers. So it kind of depends on what it is that you want to start using AI for. I've got most of my customers today are using this for internal research or powering. They use our API to power their own products. So yeah, it kind of depends. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. I was a consultant for 5 years and I had to give that answer a lot, but it kind of just depends.
Cool.
And just getting
And then,
started with ChatGPT itself is great. That's a
yeah,
good way to start.
totally. Earlier, we were talking before we started recording about like managing a team, managing virtual employees, and something like that is really it's critical in order to have set processes and standard operating procedures and that kind of stuff. Uh, I mean, that might be related to an onboarding flow for a new customer because you want to have things very clearly outlined. Do you use AI to help you do that in terms of setting your expectations, setting the processes, and how people can do things step by step?
It's funny. We're such a new business. We just incorporated a couple months ago that I haven't done that yet, but I have. It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually just chatting with a buddy of mine, and we are incorporating a Notion integration for Locusive, and I run the entire company on Notion. I want to make sure I don't give away too many secrets here, but like my whole company is on Notion, and we're connecting Notion into Locusive so that we can search through everything that we want to. So what I'm doing today is I'm preparing all the documentation. I'm preparing the data sets that I know will eventually be used by other employees in my company or other folks who join me. And then I'm connecting them all up to an AI system. In my case, obviously Locusive, but you can connect it to any AI system. So it's a great question again. Unfortunately, I'm not quite there, but I am using AI for internal company documentation quite a bit. Or at least we're going to start using it really, really heavily in a way that's a little bit more seamless rather than me having to copy and paste my documentation into ChatGPT every time.
Yeah. What is it? There was something that somebody mentioned. It might be called Scribed or something. Scribe. And it was basically like you do the thing yourself, walk through it with a screen share, and then it'll basically break it down step by step so that you're doing what would be manual and it becomes clear. And I think it might use Gen AI to elaborate
Wow.
on it, add detail.
That's really cool. I have not heard about that, but man, I just got this big smile on my face because that's pretty awesome. If you want to do something repetitively, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think that's I'm trying to see if there's anything else I can talk about to add value here, but I think that kind of covers a lot of what I wanted to go over in terms of using your own data. There's a lot to think about. If you start to build your own applications, you probably are going to be better off buying or using something off the shelf, but every company is different. These are just some of the things to consider.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Shanif, yeah, thank
I
you so
think,
much.
thank you, Gen. Yeah, I think we give people 15 minutes back. If anybody needs any help, if you want to reach out to Gen, he's Gen at supermarketers.ai. A lot of good stuff. Sign up for his newsletter. As for me, I can help you with thinking about how you can use company data. Oh, Andrew Daly hey, what's up, Andrew? You just asked the question, can you expose secure data to specific users with RAG or some other way? Yep. So one of the things, Andrew asked, can you expose secure data to specific users with RAG or some other way? This is actually, it's a great question. It's something that we've done at Locusive. If you've built a system that knows who's asking a question, you can have that system filter out any information that user doesn't have access to. This, of course, requires a little bit of infrastructure, though. You need to be able to keep track of where that information comes from and who has access to it. Peter mentioned, hey, I think you can set access and permissions on the vector database. I haven't seen a way to do that in Pinecone, but you can set metadata in a vector database. And what that means is when you store information to be looked up later, you can save information about where it came from, who's the owner, who should it belong to, who has access to it. Or you can even look up that information online when you need to use that information. And then depending on if that information is relevant for the search, you can filter it out if the user doesn't have access. But it does, as far as I know, and as far as I've built Locusive, you need to program that in into your application. So it's good. It's a good question, Andrew. Cool. Well, we're always available to answer more questions. I think we're trying to do these webinars on a little bit more of a frequent basis. So really appreciate everybody who joined. Feel free to reach out to us if we can help with anything else. We'll give you guys some time back, and I hope you all have a great rest of the week. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. All right.